Book Review: We Were Never Here by Andrea Bartz. Andrea Bartz's We Were Never Here is a taut psychological thriller that explores the complexities of female friendship, the trauma of violence, and the blurred lines between protectiveness and control. From the first page to the last, Bartz crafts a story filled with suspense, emotional depth, and a creeping sense of unease that lingers long after the final chapter. With her signature blend of slow-burning tension and razor-sharp psychological insight, Bartz delivers a novel that's as much about the danger we pose to others as the danger we pose to ourselves. Plot overview: the novel opens on the last night of a backpacking trip in Chile. Emily and her best friend Kristen are enjoying what's meant to be an idyllic vacation, full of stunning landscapes and adventurous bonding. But then, Emily returns to their hotel to find Kristen covered in blood and claiming that she had to kill a man in self-defense. If this were a one-time incident, perhaps it could be chalked up to extreme circumstances and the need to survive. But there's a problem. This isn't the first time this has happened. The year before, on another trip, a man had also ended up dead, again, supposedly in self-defense. Emily has spent the intervening months trying to forget what happened, to bury her guilt, and to regain a sense of normalcy in her life in Milwaukee. But now, with this second death, a terrifying pattern begins to emerge. As Emily grows increasingly disturbed by Kristen's explanations and actions, she starts to question the nature of their friendship and whether she can, or should, escape it. What follows is a psychological cat-and-mouse game that shifts between past and present, between truth and perception, and between devotion and destruction. Characters and relationships. At the heart of We Were Never Here lies the intense, codependent friendship between Emily and Kristen. Bartz does an exceptional job of depicting the allure and toxicity that can exist in close female friendships. From the outside, Emily and Kristen are ideal travel companions, inseparable, spontaneous, and seemingly fearless. But under the surface lies a tangled web of emotional manipulation, fear, and unresolved trauma. Emily, our protagonist, is a sympathetic and relatable narrator, but she's also deeply unreliable. Bartz places readers firmly inside Emily's mind, allowing us to see the ways her guilt and confusion warp her perception of reality. She wants to be a good person. She wants to believe the best in her friend. But as the story progresses, we see her unraveling under the weight of what's been done, and what might come next. Kristen, meanwhile, is a compelling and chilling figure. Bartz doesn't caricature her as a one-dimensional villain, but rather portrays her as someone who truly believes in the righteousness of her actions. Her loyalty to Emily is genuine, even if it's obsessive and ultimately suffocating. There's an eerie sincerity in Kristen's love for her friend that makes her all the more dangerous. She's not simply out for revenge or dominance. She's trying to preserve a relationship that she believes is essential, even sacred. One of the novel's most powerful elements is how it delves into the psychological dynamics of their friendship. Bartz explores how trauma can bond people together, and how, when left unexamined, it can also drive them apart. There's an intimacy between Emily and Kristen that goes beyond ordinary friendship, but it's not romantic or sexual, it's psychological, almost primal. The question that looms over the entire novel is, how far would you go to protect someone you love? And what happens when the person you're protecting might be your greatest threat? 1. Narrative structure and point of view. The novel is told from the first-person perspective of Emily, a young professional living in Milwaukee, who recounts her harrowing experiences with her best friend Kristen during and after two fatal overseas trips. Bartz's choice of first-person narration is critical to the book's psychological tension. We are locked inside Emily's mind, an increasingly unreliable narrator, experiencing her confusion, paranoia, and rationalizations as she tries to piece together her role in events that feel both dreamlike and dangerous. The structure toggles between past and present, starting in Chile, where the second death occurs, and continuing back home as Emily's psychological state deteriorates under Kristen's watchful presence. This choice to begin in medias res, with a shocking act of violence, hooks the reader immediately and builds tension steadily as we realize this is not the first time something like this has happened. Bartz masterfully controls pacing by slowly revealing fragments of the past and using short, emotionally charged chapters that mimic Emily's anxious mental state. The result is a sense of claustrophobia and mounting dread. 2. Character development and psychological realism. Emily is not a conventional thriller heroine. She's not a detective, a survivor of violence, or someone trying to escape an external threat. Her conflict is almost entirely internal. She's unsure of her role in the events, uncertain about her own judgment, and afraid of the consequences of both silence and exposure. Her psychology is portrayed with realism and nuance. She's not particularly assertive or decisive, rather, she's reactive, shaped by past trauma, including a sexual assault that left her feeling disempowered, and her longing for stability. Emily is an example of a protagonist shaped by her emotional wounds, and it's this vulnerability that makes her susceptible to Kristen's manipulations. Kristen, by contrast, is charismatic, dominant, and enigmatic. Bartz resists making her a cardboard villain. Instead, Kristen is fully convinced that she's protecting Emily, saving her, even, and this delusion of loyalty makes her terrifying. She is both fiercely loyal and emotionally invasive, a protector and a predator. The dynamic between the two women evolves from loving intimacy to psychological warfare. Bartz captures the ambiguity of toxic codependency in a way that is subtle and disturbing. Their friendship oscillates between nostalgic affection and oppressive control. 3. Exploration of female friendship. At the heart of the novel is an exploration of female friendship as both sanctuary and snare. The relationship between Emily and Kristen subverts the stereotypical portrayal of female bonding as inherently nurturing. Instead, Bartz shows how such relationships can harbor obsession, jealousy, and dependency. Kristen's behavior, her frequent gifts, emotional check-ins, and intense loyalty, initially read as affectionate, but over time they're revealed as coercive. Emily begins to feel stalked rather than supported. This shift from safe friendship to emotional captivity is one of the novel's most unsettling arcs. What's particularly sharp is Bartz's treatment of emotional gaslighting. Kristen reframes every criticism as an attack and every act of manipulation as love. Readers watch as Emily questions her own perception of reality, asking herself whether she is the bad friend or the victim. This is where the novel diverges from thrillers that rely on romantic entanglements. Bartz instead dives deep into platonic intimacy, showing that the deepest betrayals can come not from lovers or strangers, but from those we trust most. 4. Setting as a catalyst for chaos, the novel begins in Chile, with lush descriptions of a mountaintop hike that ends in horror. It then moves back to Milwaukee, where Kristen reappears uninvited. Later flashbacks to Cambodia, the site of the first suspicious death, add further disorientation. These locations are not just backdrops, they are symbolic spaces. The international settings heighten the sense of dislocation, danger, and freedom. Abroad, Emily and Kristen are untethered from normal life, rules, and responsibility. It is precisely this sense of adventure and anonymity that makes violence possible. Bartz uses this effectively to critique the trope of finding oneself through travel. In We Were Never Here, travel is not transformative, it's dangerous, destabilizing, and deadly. Each setting serves as a liminal space, a threshold between who Emily was and who she is becoming. The contrast between the exotic locations and Emily's sterile life in Milwaukee enhances the feeling of psychic dissociation. While Milwaukee should be a place of safety, it becomes a trap, much like Kristen herself. 5. Themes of trauma and memory. Trauma is a dominant force in the narrative, both in the form of direct violence and in the lingering psychological effects. Emily is grappling not just with the violent acts she's witnessed, and possibly enabled, but also with a prior sexual assault that shaped her understanding of personal agency and control. Bartz interweaves these traumas carefully, showing how unprocessed grief and guilt can open the door to further manipulation. Kristen becomes a protective figure, someone who believes she can save Emily by eliminating threats, even if the threats are ambiguous or imagined. The novel also examines the subjectivity of memory. Emily repeatedly questions what really happened on their previous trip, how much of Kristen's version she believed, and whether she suppressed doubts out of loyalty or fear. This unreliable narration invites readers to become detectives, parsing not just what happened, but how belief, denial, and fear warp perception. 6. Manipulation, control, and gaslighting. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of We Were Never Here is its exploration of gaslighting. Kristen repeatedly reframes reality, positioning herself as the only one who truly understands Emily. She minimizes Emily's fear, oversteps boundaries, and weaponizes their shared secrets. Kristen's behavior is disturbingly familiar to anyone who has experienced an emotionally abusive relationship. She isolates Emily from her support system, invades her home and work life, and frames all dissent as betrayal. The reader watches as Emily becomes increasingly unsure of her own reality, caught between gratitude and growing dread. Bartz handles this theme with emotional clarity, showing the gradual erosion of autonomy that can happen in the name of love and loyalty. 7. Genre expectations and subversion. We Were Never Here positions itself as a thriller, and it delivers suspense, twists, and a menacing antagonist. However, it subverts the genre by focusing less on external threats and more on the slow, psychological breakdown of the protagonist. Instead of relying on plot twists alone, Bartz builds tension through emotional stakes. The scariest moments are not action scenes, but quiet confrontations, an unexpected knock on the door, a phone call at night, an offhand comment with sinister implications. There is also no detective, no chase, no courtroom finale. The justice sought in the novel is personal, not legal. The resolution is not about clearing a name or punishing a criminal, but about reclaiming a self that has been overshadowed by guilt and manipulation. 8. Conclusion and final assessment. Andrea Bartz's We Were Never Here is a meticulously crafted psychological thriller that shines in its dissection of trauma, intimacy, and manipulation. It's a book that refuses to offer easy answers, instead forcing readers to sit with discomfort and moral ambiguity. Through a deeply flawed but sympathetic protagonist, Bartz explores how emotional trauma can make us vulnerable to coercion, and how intense friendship can blur into obsession. The novel challenges the reader to consider what loyalty really means, and what it costs. Though some readers may find the pacing slow in the first half or wish for more closure in the ending, the novel's strength lies in its psychological realism and emotional resonance. Bartz isn't writing to shock, she's writing to unsettle, to make us examine the stories we tell ourselves about the people we love. Rating: 4.5/5 stars, a gripping, emotionally intelligent thriller that lingers in the mind. Perfect for fans of The Girl on the Train or Gone Girl, but with a more nuanced, intimate take on female friendship and trauma.